everyone. My name is Kara Romano, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Connection's latest Connectors Conversation Panel, a web discussion designed to bring thought-provoking perspectives and brilliant protagonists together around a timely topic to cultivate community growth. We appreciate your participation and would especially like to thank ProBook for their support in sponsoring this event. Today, we're going to be talking about the digital workplace, specifically the impact on global talent. Our conversation is going to focus on the human element of digital work, including HR elements like recruitment of global talent, onboarding, compensation, retention, as well as technology innovations to support these processes. While some of this activity was certainly happening digitally pre-pandemic, it has been greatly accelerated, and our experts will share best practices and their perspectives on addressing adoption issues, things like culture, change management, communication challenges. So we have three speakers joining us to share their expertise, and although they have very different responsibilities and backgrounds, I think you're going to be surprised at the common threads that permeate the conversation. So to start, each of them will answer one critical question that addresses a key issue, and then I'm going to step back and let them chat. So we may have time for a short Q&A session at the end, so if you have any questions, submit them through the comment function on YouTube. If we don't get to all of your questions, we'll follow up with you within 24 hours. Okay, so our first speaker will be Nancy Deborah Mano, who is the Chief Experience Strategist at Outside In Experience Strategists, where she sits at the intersection of employee and customer experience, enabling clients to deliver their brand differentiators at the highest caliber in every area of their business. Her employee and customer-centric background is built upon working for esteemed brands such as the Walt Disney Company and Apple, as well as in various verticals, spanning retail, technology, hospitality, and fashion. Our second speaker will be Steve Bonomo, who is a partner at Arete Partners with over 20 years of experience in executive recruiting and corporate recruiting leadership. Steve's expertise lies in building talent strategies to scale organizational hiring efforts globally. In fact, he spent 17 years with Adidas in the United States and Europe, where he established and led the talent acquisition function and helped scale Adidas from 25,000 to 85,000 employees across all disciplines. Then he led talent acquisition for Twitter, where he helped the company grow from more than 2,500 hires over his tenure. Our third speaker will be Keith Sims, C-level recruiter and founder of Integrity Resource Management. Steve is an enterprise application solutions thought leader with over 20 years of experience working as an executive coach and mentor who specializes in building teams to deliver enterprise software in design, development, sales, implementation, and production support for Fortune 1000 companies. He has been successful communicating and delivering value to global partners and supporting international operations digitally. So with those introductions, you can see why we've introduced these three people, and I'd like to thank you all again. So let's get going. So Nancy Deborah, you're up first. So you coach companies on developing an outside-in perspective. Help us understand why this is so important for digital workers, and what's the impact on employee and customer experience?
Sure. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I like to tell clients and people that we're prospectively working with or any companies that the caliber of experience that you deliver to your employees is the caliber of experience they will deliver to your customers. And so everybody's got customers, right? Whether that is a face-to-face customer or it's a vendor or it's somebody internally, it's the customer. So when you think about from a human resources standpoint, you think about brand differentiation. And you think about, what distinguishes you as a brand and what does that feel like? How do you attract talent? How do you attract the top talent? How do you retain talent? How do they feel good while they're working? All of those pieces are really, really critical and important. And a lot of times we hear that from former employees. We hear that from people that may still work there, but also former employees. We hear it from people that engage with the brand because they want to work there because they love the product or they love the service. So brand differentiator is key, and that really starts with the internal experience of the employee. Secondly, the other piece that you're thinking about from a digital work environment, we think about psychological safety of the employees, as well as what are the tools they have to work with. Is it streamlined? Does it feel good? Can they do their work without interruption? Are they scattered? Do they know where they're going for information? Is it easy to do their work and accomplish it, not just from a leadership standpoint, but also from the tools and technology they have? And then lastly, the other piece is we're thinking about while they're there is motivation and retention, and how do they feel to be able to contribute? How do they feel to be able to learn and ask questions? How do they feel to be able to challenge and actually bring about change catalyst in the environment? So we're looking at all of that, right? And it's very cumbersome. A lot of companies do it really well on one side or the other. What the challenge is getting both of those together to make sure that they're equally looking on both sides for both the employee experience and for the customer experience.
Thank you. Especially in the CPG industry, everyone seems to be focused on, what is the customer thinking, and not as much on the internal aspect. So you kind of flipped it upside down. So I appreciate that. Okay, Steve, what are the bottom line benefits of the digital workplace, and how do those benefits enable companies and employees to succeed? You've been working with, employees remotely, digitally, all over the world. Help us understand some of those benefits and why people want to do this.
Yeah, so I believe hiring people, no matter where they sit, gives companies an enormous advantage overall. I have a couple of experiences, a bit different, where I could share sort of some of the specific benefits that came up. You mentioned I spent a lot of time with Adidas, traditional big box, a retailer organization. Adidas wasn't really a company that was willing to do much remote. In fact, they're often requiring leadership roles to actually be in Germany. And this was a big disadvantage for us in a variety of areas. I think the company was often not based in large metropolitan areas, which led to problems when it came to really attracting talent. I mean, Herzogenaurach, Germany, was a booming metropolis of 10,000 people, I think. But it created some challenges. Now, the benefit to that would ultimately be, once you had people in, and that was their hometown, and there were quite a few people actually that were like that, it was very difficult to get them out or to leave the organization. So your retention numbers were extremely strong there. I think the disadvantage, again, of not hiring remote was, if you were in a mid-management role anywhere outside of Germany, it was very difficult to progress within that organization. Now, what's happened of late with Adidas is just the fact that you've started to see a bit more of this centralization approach with the new leadership that they brought into the organization, where they do want people to move back to the headquarters. The other thing that people might not think about as well is, based on the demographics of the area where you're based, it has a tremendous impact also on diversity and your ability to hire diverse talent into the organization. So then let's fast forward to my time at Twitter, where I went after a while. And leading up to that, the company really struggled to hire talent into San Francisco for a few areas. It was extremely competitive. Google, Facebook, Amazon, if anyone was good, they were already talking to them for the most part. And any candidate that we went to offer with usually had about 3 to 4 of those offers. We had lacked diversity in the organization as well. And one of the things that Jack Dorsey had committed to, even prior to the pandemic, was really about, hey, let's start hiring people outside of San Francisco, and let's see what's ultimately going to happen. And I think there were a few phases to this. The first was, we started to open offices in areas like Boulder, New York, Boston, Seattle, LA, and it allowed us to attract a broader pool of talent into the organization, whether it be engineers, salespeople, whoever that might be. It really had a tremendous benefit on our ability to close people faster, increasing our offer acceptance rates from 50% to closer to 80%. There was a ton. And then phase 2 of that was when Jack came out. And this was, kind of coincidental, but it was before the pandemic, where he said, you know what, these hubs are great, but we're also lacking diversity in the majority of them. Let's just hire people anywhere within the United States. Now, Europe did their own thing, and Asia did a little bit of their own thing that was similar. But in the United States, as an example, the results of that were a significantly increased talent pool, our ability to convert people to hires went way up because people who lived in Ohio or Nebraska, Michigan's a great example of that with great engineering schools. They didn't have a lot of tech in their backyard. And if they wanted to work in tech, they had to move to New York or San Francisco, but not anymore. It also has benefits from a compensation standpoint, right? Silicon Valley is traditionally known for paying people extremely high amounts of money to get them in. Now, you can still pay people very aggressively, but if that money in Ohio or in another part of the country is going to be significantly greater, so retention, it had impacts on that. And then another thing that had a significant impact was really on our ability to recruit diverse talent by hiring in places like Houston, hiring in places throughout Michigan, a lot more in Florida, New Mexico, these different places where the populations were very different, huge impact. So overall, I think competition is very fierce, right? Especially in engineering, product, sales type roles. Your ability to sort of open up that talent pool and recruit, nationally and here in the United States was a huge advantage for us. Had multiple benefits from overall engagement, diverse hiring, ability to convert people. So I think there's so many benefits to it that, excuse me, that we discovered as we went on.
Yeah, it benefits not only to the employer, to the company, but to the employee, as you said. So I want to come back. I'm going to let Keith talk in a second, but I want to come back to, you kind of alluded to some leadership and some cultural changes. So that's kind of a big theme in this. I want to come back to that.
Sure.
So before we do that, Keith, okay, you've been managing digital workplaces all over the world for a very long time. So best practices, what have you learned about enabling the digital worker, and how can technology facilitate success?
So I got started in a completely remote workforce back in 2008. So I worked for a company, I was in-house, I had workers all over the country, and only 2 in my office and 14 outside of my office. I got used to that model, but everybody was working in a physical office. When I left that company and started integrity resource management, we started looking at how can we do this and allow people to work remotely? At the time, we were blessed that Skype had come out, and we actually moved to Skype chat, Skype business phones from the beginning. Extremely low cost, extremely available, easy move to screen shares. So Microsoft buying them was, I think, an amazing move and led to some of the tools that Microsoft's been offering today. I know there's a lot of other great tools out there like Basecamp, Slack. Atlassian's got a multitude of engagement tools that people can share and work together simultaneously. But I would say the biggest move is to change the concept of work as time spent in a location to work is an accomplishment that you deliver on a daily basis. It's clearly setting expectations, communicating outcomes, and then co-working. One of the things we started doing is anytime we start a new project, I'm not sitting physically next to somebody, but I would actually get on a phone or do the first 4 phone calls with them, or sit there and look at their plan. They would fill out a plan that they were working on. We'd look at the plan, have a conversation about it. I'd have them start on the plan and give me a call back in 20 minutes. Like, give me a call back. Let me know how it's going. And so it was a complete change in the engagement model with my employees. We changed from all of us having team meetings together to more one-on-one meetings. And I think that's totally changed my relationship with my employees as well. So all the staff will get on the phone, and it's just like when you're breaking the ice with somebody that you're just meeting for the first time as a customer. I get on the phone, hey, how are you doing? How are the kids? Tell me about what's going on, and we'll spend 2 or 3 minutes in that personal engagement. And then, okay, how are we going to achieve your goals today? And I think the other piece about having a digital remote workforce is keeping your conversation focused on what that person's trying to achieve at work and what they're trying to achieve in their career. If you can align their goals to the company goals on a consistent basis and help them break that down from what do you want to do in the course of a year and how is that going to impact your family and your personal legacy, your ability to donate money to your church or to somebody in your community, some organization in your community that you're involved in, and then break that down on a monthly, weekly, daily, what has to happen to make that happen. Now you have something that you can manage to. And I think organizationally, a lot of us got lazy before the remote workforce, because somebody's sitting over there, and if they're screwing off, if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, you can see them, right? You walk over and slot them in the back of the head, right? Or tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey man, get back to work. With people remote, I've had clients of mine have asked me flat out, Keith, do you use a keystroke tracker? Do you have cameras looking at your people while they're working to make sure they're there? And I'm not at all interested in that. I don't want employees working for me that I have to babysit or that need to be there. And honestly, last year we had culling. I guess it was 2019, mid 2019, as we really looked at our staff and who was performing and who wasn't, who was thriving in the digital workplace, where they could set their own goals and achieve those goals. They could reach out and ask for help when they needed it. And they were willing to take that responsibility. That was their responsibility to ask for help, not my responsibility to keep telling them what to do all the time. It's a different kind of person, and it's made for a much more enjoyable work environment. I would tell you my stress level has dropped amazingly since 2018, 2019, when I had staff that I was always trying to look over their shoulder, versus the staff and the team that I have today, where they're managing their task on a daily, weekly basis and setting their own goals. Hey, I'm going to deliver this by Tuesday. Okay, hold me to it. They're engaging me because we've set up those kind of goals. From a leadership perspective, I've done the same thing back to them. So I've gone to them and said, hey, I'm going to do this. Oh, hold on. Okay, can you guys hear me again?
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, you took too long. My headset died. It started beeping when you started talking. Anyway,
Oh, no.
you know, the technology, it's great when it works, right? So one of the things we talked about and we wanted to cover was tools, culture, trust, engagement. And I will tell you that from the tools standpoint, we did cover the tools. We find that putting in place any kind of the planning and engagement tools, the checks and balances, I guess what I was saying right before my headset died was that I actually go back to my staff and I tell them. So they're supposed to tell me what they're going to do within a certain period of time or by the end of the week. And then I do the same thing to them. So I tell them what I'm going to do and I have them hold me accountable. And at the end of the week, when we have our wrap up meeting, I tell them, hey, I accomplished this. This is what I did. This is what I've delivered. So it's joint accountability and keeping everybody focused on that we're working together. You're not working for me. I just happen to be the guy that's leading us in the direction where we have to get. From a cultural standpoint, I think the most important thing is to make sure that people feel valued, even if they're not sitting across from you, that you're engaged with them, and then empathy, right? If something, it's not any different than if they were sitting across the table from you, but you know, reaching out with the small touch, a card, a kind word, you know, hey, you guys, you need to take the rest of the day off. Right? If something happens in their life, making sure that you're engaging in that, not trying to double down. Hey, we've got this thing to get done by tomorrow. You have to do it. It's, hey, you know what? You need to take the rest of the day off. Go for it. We'll figure it out.
Okay, we've got a lot to unpack here. I want to thank all of you for the intros. I want to start with the culture piece because you guys all talked about that. And when we, in our pre-events discussions, we all talked about change management being an important part of that. So how do you move to that culture where you have that empathy, where you have that kind of relationship? I think there was a lot of concern that when we went digital, right, because of the pandemic, that people were going to lose that personal connection. And I'm hearing you guys say it's actually better. So help us understand how to change that culture. You know, Steve, you mentioned it might come from the top. Nancy, I know you talked about a lot of one-on-one activities. Nancy, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think, you know, there is a piece, it comes from the top, and also your experience is only as good as your manager. So you can have a great experience at the top and the CEO saying something, but it has to be throughout the entire organization of managerial. And I think one thing that's really important is that companies know their set of values and why they exist and what the reputation they want to have as an experience of their culture, both internally and externally to their customers. That should reflect each other. If you want your customers to feel that there were special interactions that they felt, you know, that they were personalized, you need to have personalized interactions with your employees. And I think that, you know, that is one of the areas that we talk about leadership, and we talk about talent, and we talk about those buzzwords. But it's really important to have training that goes through the entire organization, that everybody's focusing on those things, and that we look at areas of psychological safety as areas that we look to promote or even to hire, that we hear those things, you know, when people are interviewing, and the questions that we're asking, to make sure that things like inclusion, things like, you know, allowing people to challenge and allowing them to have rewarded vulnerability and not feel like they're going to lose their job because they challenge something. Things of those nature really, really helps. The other piece of that is also really clear, defined tools. So Keith named off a bunch. A lot of companies make a mistake that they have too many tools in their arsenal, or all these different parts of the organization are using different tools. It makes it very cumbersome and very hard to be streamlined to do your work. So I think that's, you know, one of the areas. The other piece of the culture is, do you want people tethered to each other and to the company and to the brand? And how do you foster that? So sometimes that's not just about the job. Sometimes it is about, you know, a weekly or monthly happy hour virtually, and maybe you send out some really fun engagement gift to your team to engage them, or quarterly. Maybe it's about doing you know, health competitions, or things where people have competitive nature and spirit. Those are all things that help people work better together and create culture. But it does have to start from the top. A manager will only get so far, but it also has to be top down and bottom up, and it has to be outside in as well as inside out. So it reflects, everywhere reflects each other as a mirror, and we have to think about that. So I always tell clients, you know, let's put down what you want your customers to feel from your brand, and then what do you want your employees to feel? Because it should be the same if you want them to deliver it.
Go ahead.
I can certainly add to that. I don't necessarily think that it makes culture better being remote. I think the fact that you have the opportunity to allow people to you know, give them that flexibility and live the life that they want to live, where they want to live, and give them options is what really makes the culture the best thing. You know, if you think about, you know, I had a couple of great experiences, again, with just Adidas and Twitter, where, I mean, you want to be a part of that environment, you know, playing soccer at lunchtime, or throwing the football, you know, when you have a break in your meetings. Like, these are things that were absolutely amazing. And I realized that if you're in a corporate skyscraper somewhere, that's probably not going to be what it is. But I do feel that just giving people the choice of what they want to do and how they want to get their work done at the end of the day is really what builds a great culture. I think around the topic of change management, you know, I think top down can work to some degree, but in larger organizations, what we experienced with Twitter when we talked about, you know, hire people anywhere, is it may come out from the top, and Jack had a clear vision of what he wanted over at Twitter, but then you have the message sort of gets diluted as you move further down in the organization. So at the highest level, it might be, let's hire the best talent wherever it is. That next level down, it might be, you know, let's hire the best talent wherever it is, you know, as long as they're within a proximity of these offices. And then one layer down on that was, you can hire these roles wherever you want them to hire, but these roles really need to be in the office. So I think that there needs to be a huge investment on that change management and communication. I also think there needs to be a great feedback loop, right? So how is this working? How are the employees feeling? How are the managers feeling? How do we go about improving that? And I'll refer back to Twitter because it's my best example of how this was done right. But they would dedicate HR teams to just the remote workforce, so that you would have the opportunity to sort of be engaged within the regular organization. Your voice could be heard. They would send us all the same stuff that you would get, like the snacks and everything in a tech building. Certainly it wasn't the same, but you know, the cultural piece is a massive component of it that needs to be invested in, and there needs to be a good feedback loop.
How do you get the culture for current employees, existing employees, as well as during the interview process? Is there a difference?
Oh, do you mean, are you referring to like, how do you sell that culture when you might be interviewing people?
Yeah. How do you tell that there's a good cultural fit during the interview process? As you know, is it different than the culture that you're trying to build with your existing employees?
Yeah, I would imagine there's definitely some differences, but you know, when you do it enough, and I'm sure with Keith, who's done this so many times, you sort of forget the medium upon which you're talking to people on, right? You know, when I was traveling back and forth to San Francisco, you know, every few weeks, I could be sitting in a chair and be like, wait, am I there or am I here? And, you know, even when you are there, you might go into a meeting room and there might be one person there and the other two people who may live in the vicinity of the office may just be joining remote. And you just expect to turn on the screen and they're going to be there. Mm-hmm. If you did that at Adidas, and I gave you this example before, and you walked into a room and nobody was there, you're just like, where did everybody go? I mean, there could be 5 screens on the wall and you're not going to turn one of those on expecting them to be there. So I think there's certainly differences always when you're meeting people in person, but you know, the ways around that during the pandemic for us in this role where we're recruiting executives was people would go and schedule a hike if they could at the end of the interview process, or do something outdoors where they could get a general feel of it, because one of the two sides fairly frequently would want to at least see eye to eye the other person that they might be leaving their job to, you know, go join.
Yeah, I love that concept of getting people out to do something physical. Walking and talking really loosens people up to just, you know, be who they are. They stop putting on this premise. You know, one of the things that Nancy brought up that I was super appreciative of on our prep call, and I am even today, is that psychological safety. People do their best work when they can focus on doing their job and being the best version of themselves rather than trying to prove to somebody that they know what they're doing. I know there was a Harvard Business Review study a few years back that the outcome ended up being deliberately developmental organizations. So DDOs, if anybody wants to look that up. But the value proposition was that people spent 50% of their time at work trying to prove to other people that they knew what they're doing. Now, in our organization, I always start all of our conversations, and I made that part of my engagement, is to start the conversation with, hey, I'm assuming you know what you're doing. If you don't, ask. Either I will help you, Sam will help you, right? I'm going to direct you to somebody else in the team who's available to help you with that today. But I want to make sure that you always feel comfortable asking questions. We're here for you. Everybody succeeds together. We are a team. And giving people that opportunity to, you know, feel like they can ask any question. No question's stupid. There's no stupid questions. And then on top of that, that they're not going to get fired if they make a mistake, a genuine mistake. They didn't know that was going to happen. They didn't anticipate the outcome. If they make the same mistake 6 times, you're probably going to get fired. But if you make it 1 time, you know, you're not going to get fired. Hey, we're going to eat it. It's okay. You know, we're going to figure out how not to do that again. The other piece for me from a leadership standpoint, and this is part of that, how do I provide leadership to people who are not sitting across the table from me? And I really started looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and updated it to, you know, my simplified version, which is today, if you can provide somebody safety, a place to belong, and a future to believe in. And I think that those 3 areas, if you can critically provide that to your staff on an ongoing basis, you will not experience high turnover. All of the clients that I've dealt with and coached, when they were experiencing high turnover, they were failing in one of those 3 areas. They were not providing safety. They weren't giving that person a place to belong. They didn't make them part of a team. They didn't make them understand how important their work was to the success and outcome for the entire organization. And they didn't let them know what was going to happen next. And I will tell you that my biggest concern for most of the companies today as they move into digital is they're going to pigeonhole workers into a single job and say, hey, you're there, you're doing this job. We like it when you're doing this job. Keep doing this job. My biggest concern about the move to the digital workforce is that there will no longer be a future to believe in. And we're already seeing this in some of the international cultures, like in India, where the average turnover has dropped to less than 18 months for technology workers. It's closer to 14 months. Most companies don't receive real value out of the worker until they've been there 8 months. So that means they're only getting 6 months of true value out of a worker before they leave the job. And that's my consistent concern. So Nancy, how do you see that psychological Oh,
Is
go
that-
ahead.
Is that because it's digital? So a lot of the things that that all of you just talked about sounds like, management 101. That's great advice for anybody. Is it different when it's a digital workplace?
So most of the Indian workers in the technology field are in AMS roles. So they're working in application managed services roles where they're supporting US customers from India. And most of the time they're in an office in India, but they're supporting a US client and they're working on a US time zone. And they may or may not be engaging at all with their manager because their manager is managing AMS for multiple customers. Mm-hmm. So, I remember back in the day, I was kidding with my staff. I'm like, yeah, man, I see my manager about 5 minutes a week, and 2 of that's in the bathroom.
I think, Kara, just to jump on that piece, and I think it's management 101, but there has to be a shift in the way that our managers think. They don't think this way today, right? They think of it as very separate, the remote people and the internal people, or, the people on site. There has to be a change in the entire way that you think about leadership and what that means, because it is no longer just calling a meeting and being in meetings 6 and 7 and 8 hours a day, like 6 or 7 or 8 meetings a day to be productive. So we have to think about different. You don't just get to, look up at somebody and go, hey, meet me in my office. We have to have a complete shift and change. And so one of the things that's really important, and I think Steve and Keith will probably agree, is ongoing learning. Whether companies provide that, individuals, we have to keep people learning about management, about engaging psychologically safe, about making people, how do we get them there quicker to be able to contribute? How do we make that happen quicker? One of the pieces from a digital workforce perspective is onboarding. It's a completely huge piece to have this fantastic, phenomenal experience of onboarding, getting your technology, of understand what pieces, somebody walking you through that, seeing the videos that you have to do, not just because they're compliance videos, but understanding where you go for information, having calls set up with your teammates or your peers or people that you'll work with in conjunction in other parts of the business, all set for you. So you feel really supported, maybe whatever that looks like, right? A week, 4 days, 2 weeks, whatever it looks like. And still making sure, I know a lot of companies, and Steve, I don't know if Adidas did this, Apple did this, Disney did this, right? There's these days that you get immersed in the culture and you understand the vision of the company, you understand why they exist, you understand their history, and you get all jazzed up, right? Those first couple days. You still need those things. So how do we do it digitally? How do we give people tools at their fingertips? And how do we teach managers and coach them and teach them internally in the organization in learning and development to be able to be focusing on that shift? Like, hey guys, wipe your heads clean. Management is completely new today. And how do we do that? And using design thinking and things that can really kind of shake things up and shift. And Keith, what I spoke about was the psychological safety. I refer a lot to Dr. Timothy Clark. It's Timothy R. Clark of Leader Factor. And he put psychological safety as 4 steps of inclusion, of the ability to learn and make mistakes, like Keith said, the ability to contribute, and then the ability to challenge within the organization, where we see a lot of diversity and inclusion and representation. That needs to be there, but it's a hierarchy. And the piece that's so critical is that it has to be an environment of rewarded vulnerability, is what he says. Five things, an environment of rewarded vulnerability. And that's so important, because you can't have these change catalysts without that feeling of safety. And especially when you don't have people's nervous systems front face to kind of get what they're doing. I tell as many people as possible, use video if you can, because you can see a lot from what people's eyes, their, the tics on their mouth, like, okay, you didn't get that. No, I understand. No, let me explain it one more time, or what was the point, or explain it back to me. It's something that we miss, but we have to make this shift that now that there's not 2 separate workforces, they are the same workforce.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to change moving forward as people start to go, as we get more of the world vaccinated, as people start to go back to offices? Do you think that will change?
I think that one is, I think that if the companies that are going to do this well are going to understand that it's not a going back to the office, that the change of the way that we look at work, and Keith said this really well, of like the productivity and what we get accomplished and I didn't use your phrasing, Keith, but of what we get accomplished, the flexibility in work, I think, is what we've all been desiring. That's why people wanted to work from home and remote, wherever they lived, or not competing with a spouse's job or losing their job, right? You know, marriages break up over that. Who wants to move and who doesn't want to move? Right. But you look at that, and I think we're gonna start to see the companies that do it really well, Kara, I think are gonna see flexibility. And there's going to be these periods, maybe somebody's out of the office for 2 months and then they're back in for a couple weeks, or they're in for 3 weeks, or they want to go on a sabbatical and go all over. And somebody's sitting here about generational approaches. You're looking at the generation that's coming out of college today that is not used to, they know that they're going to be jumping jobs multiple times, right? There's no pension and lifetime health benefits for life that's going to keep us in a company forever. So we're seeing that they want flexibility, and they're very willing to be part of something, but they want to be safe. They want to know that they can contribute, and they want a challenge. They believe that they're coming out of college and they have new ideas. And I think in certain companies, there always has to be this balance. You do want the new ideas of people that's coming out with fresh new things to shake you up and invigorate your product and invigorate your environment and your customers.
But you also don't want to lose the baby boomers any sooner than you're going to lose them. And I think the other thing about the digital workforce and the digital transformation, it is allowing people to work longer for the same companies than they necessarily would have. In fact, I have multiple clients who have, quote unquote, retired and then become back engaged with the same company that they worked in-house, going to work every day for 30 years. Now they're engaged as a consultant, except they live in Florida on the beach, right? I actually just talked to one of my clients yesterday, and I'm like, it's a little loud at the beach today. And she's like, this is my life now, Keith. She's like, this is my life. She's like, I will do any work, but I am not going anywhere. I'm going to be here on the beach. And I'm like, I get it, Penny. You know what? I think there's a lot of opportunity to bring those generations together. And I think the other piece is starting to create that documentation. One of the guys that I work with, a guy named Chris Rao, he was the CIO at Rico. And they started looking at how they could take technology and really use digital transformation to enable the newer workers to learn from the guys that had 30 years fixing these pieces of equipment. They ended up taking Google Glass, putting the headset on the guys who were there fixing a piece of equipment. And when they get to a piece of equipment they'd never seen before, maybe it was too old, it's like not a newer piece of equipment, but the client's still using it, they would call into a center based out of Phoenix, nice and warm and dry, good for people with arthritis who can't get down on their knees anymore. And one of the old guys would walk them through how to fix the piece of equipment. He's looking through their eyes and saying, okay, that piece over there on the left, that's what you need to pull that out, turn this, disconnect that cable, the green one. He'd walk them through it. Now that guy's fixed this piece of equipment, and now he can do it the next time. And they've got this center of, 10 or 15 guys who could fix anything, that Rico ever made, sitting in Phoenix, nice and warm. They don't have to be in Chicago winters anymore. And I'm definitely thinking about that today in Indianapolis with 14 inches. No, I should be more warmer.
Technology has certainly enabled a lot of this. And we talk about that augmented and virtual reality and all the tools that we talked about earlier. Absolutely. So
and tool wise, I know that was one of the things we talked about on the tools, but I will tell you, there's a lot of tools out there. I know, Nancy, you mentioned, at the end of the day, we've got to kind of stabilize to one set of tools. My team really moved to, just really refocused on Microsoft. I know Andre Lewis, who's the Microsoft Teams manager, and what these guys have done in the last 4 or 5 years to really make that a complete collaborative tool across documents, sharing, shared folders, video, real-time document sharing. And there's so many tools that do that. But whatever platform you work with today, you can literally be anywhere and work on a document real time with someone anywhere in the world. And in the last week, I've worked on documents with people in Dubai, Guyana, India, and Georgia, the country Georgia, not the state. So just in the last week, I've worked with people on presentations and documents in 4 completely different countries. And it's also changed how we might engage with customers. We're at a point where we talked about hiring the best in the world. If you're looking for the best in the world for the biggest company, then that's one set of people. But there's mid-sized companies that are getting into enterprise software. They may be doing 100 to 500 million a year in revenue. And the guy who's the best in the world for Twitter, or a company that's doing 10 billion in revenue, is not the best guy for a company that's doing 2 to 500 million in revenue, and where do we find those people? And we're starting to find them in some of the old Baltics. There's companies that have moved completely to e-commerce from brick and mortar retail stores in the last year because of COVID. There's an organization that I've been working with the key designer from, and they were 200 million in revenue, 85% brick and mortar stores, and they moved to about 75% same day delivery in the automotive parts space, all through SAP Hybris e-commerce. And that's a story that I know a lot of organizations in the United States are going to be interested in, but we don't have as many people ready to deliver that with a track record and saying, I've done this, I can do it again for you. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Those tools are definitely important. We talk about, just the video tools, like what we're using now, so to be able to talk and see each other, but also those collaboration tools and things to help build that employee engagement, those fun culture things. And there are companies that are sprouting up that are doing, virtual team bonding stuff all the time. So I think there's a lot that technology helps with. I'm wondering, when we talk about the generational aspect, do you find that the older generation is not interested in learning new technologies, or do they embrace it?
I find that they're eager to embrace it. I mean, I think that there's a little bit of discomfort when they first get started, but as soon as somebody kind of walks them through and gets them comfortable with it, they're on. So I don't think there's anything that's holding people back. I think, honestly, that technology's gotten easier to adapt to over the years. I remember, back in the day, Microsoft would release a new version of Microsoft Word, and it's like, no, I'm not changing. I'm going to stick with this version. I'm tired of all the changes and the moving my buttons. It's like going to the grocery store and they redesign it. You're like, where's the fruit?
It's only Excel power users that are like that now.
Right.
Don't mess with my macros.
Yeah, but nowadays, I mean, every time there's an update and there's constant updates, I mean, they're more gradual. I think, people are getting, I think, number one, the user experience from the software companies has become, it's a lot easier to adapt to. They're very focused on delivering a user experience that's easy for people to connect with. And I think the other piece is that as a global culture, people are so used to dealing with and using software on a daily basis as part of whatever that they're doing, that, it's much easier for people to adopt new technology.
Right. Okay, so with that, I've got one final question for all of you. I'm looking for one piece of advice. So if someone is either trying to transition to a digital workplace, or trying to embrace, what's happened because of the pandemic with a more remote workforce than they had before, what's one piece of advice that you would give them? Either something that you've learned over the decades or something that you wish someone had told you when you first started.
I'll jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
No, go ahead, Steve. I'm glad not to go first this time.
I was going to say my advice would be to reach out to somebody who's lived in this world and ask them everything they've learned over the last year. That would be my one piece of advice, because you can eliminate a lot of the mistakes and thoughts and things that you could just never think about.
Yep. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I'm going to let you go. Keith, were you going to say?
I'm happy to go if you're ready. Honestly, I think the biggest piece is to create that customer feedback loop and employee feedback loop. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to make mistakes. Make sure you keep that feedback loop open. Ask for feedback on a regular basis. How is this working? What concerns do you have? And then assign people to do research and find other tools for you. As we engage tools, the first thing I do is we're using it for about a week. How do you like it? And then, is there anything else we should be considering? So I assign that out to the team. So when we do adopt a tool, it's a team decision. Everybody's committed to it, or we've decided that this is the best thing. I think adoption of tools really comes down to the acceptance that this is the best tool that we should be investing our time in, rather than something was applied, this is what we're using, do it. So for me, especially in smaller teams where we have some flexibility, you get into a global team, maybe that doesn't work as well, but I still think for the option of having them research and come back and then there's a decision made is important, because they feel a part of the process of that selection and they can engage and invest in the tool.
Good. Okay.
So mine, I think those were great because they were things that were in my head. So that was good. So I've dwindled it down now. But to me, it's a strategy. and it has to be planned and thoughtful and thought about and looked at from not just the employee's suite of tools, but also the suite of tools that you're using and impacting the customer. So there has to be integration between tools. And during that strategizing, if you don't have employees that are utilizing the tools and their managers or strategists only thinking about it, you're doing it wrong and it's not going to be successful. You have to have people that are using those tools in the selection process.
Okay, some great advice. Okay, so ConneXiOn would like to thank all of our brilliant speakers, Nancy D'Abramano, Steve Bonomo, and Keith Sims. And we'd also like to thank ProBook for their sponsorship. So a replay of this discussion will be available within 2 hours, and we'll be posting summaries of our speakers' perspectives on LinkedIn and on our website. So follow ConneXiOn on LinkedIn for more information about participating in the community, about making custom connections and impacting conversations like this. So watch our page for information about our next session, which will be focused on the operational and supply chain aspects of the digital workspace, the automation piece. So part 2 of this conversation. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day. Stay safe.